Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about If It Bleeds by Stephen King, the big boy himself. This was published last year, I believe, or the year before. Has 4 shorter stories inside, much in the same format as 4 Past Midnight or Different Seasons. So I'll give a rundown in here of what each story was about, what I thought of it overall, some stuff I liked, some stuff I didn't like, just my feelings on the collection, how it stacks up against Stephen King's other stuff for me. I will be working my way through probably quite a lot of Stephen King this year. I've read about half his stuff so far, so like and subscribe to join me on this brilliant journey. What's the first one you read? What's your favourite? Let me know below in the comments. The first story in this, Mr. Harrigan's Phone, is about a kid who takes up some gardening work, some reading work for an old, rich man that lives in town. They get very fond of each other. He ends up buying the old man, Mr. Harrigan, a cell phone. The old man gets really into using it to check the stock market. When he finally dies, the boy slips it into his coffin. One night later, after missing his friend, he leaves a voicemail on the old man's phone, calls him one last time, and then gets a mysterious text in response from beyond the grave. The second story, The Life of Chuck, is about a guy whose entire world, entire universe is collapsing and slowly winking out. A story told in reverse with the end of the world at the beginning, that talks about the countless and limitless realities that our minds contain. The third and titular story, If It Bleeds, is one that directly follows on from the events of King's novel that came out a couple of years ago, The Outsider. I would say that's essential to read before you read this, because it has got spoilers in it for that story, and also for Mr. Mercedes. In this story, Holly Gibney, who is a recurring character in Outsider and the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, tracks down through her private detective agency a creature similar to the one that threatened her and Detective Ralph Anderson in The Outsider. I can't really say much other than that without spoiling it, but this was by far my favourite story in the collection. The last one is just called Rat. It's about a struggling author who goes to a cabin in the woods. He subsists occasionally writing short stories, but this is really his last attempt, his last crack at a novel. He gets trapped there, cut off in a winter storm, and makes a bargain with a talking rat who agrees to finish his novel for him in exchange for a terrible and high price. This book has kind of redeemed recent King for me. There's a few of King's more recent books that I haven't enjoyed very much. I was starting to think he'd gone a bit soft. But this was really cool. I'm back on the wagon. These were, for the most part, less supernaturally fantastical than unnerving people-y stories, which gave them quite a Twilight Zone feel. These could have been all just individual episodes of the Twilight Zone, honestly. This book, this collection, is definitely an exhibition of how well and how quickly, in how few pages, Stephen King can build likeable, relatable characters that are human and have depth. It's very rare that you read a Stephen King novel with a wooden protagonist. And I think writing people is really where he shines. It's what makes his less fantastical stuff equally as compelling as his fantasy and his horror. I feel like he definitely has a writing style. If you gave me a lot of passages of writing, I feel like I would be able to pick out which one was his. In the good character's breath, I will say that I love Holly Gibney. She's one of my favourite Stephen King characters overall. And I'm really glad that she's one that's popping up. I'm excited that she might have a place in the Stephen King universe going forward. Her character is very affected by and very shaped by trauma, but not defined by trauma, and I think that's really important. Her thought processes in the book feel relatable and natural. She's just a great character. I did watch the Outsider TV series before I read The Outsider or read this book. So I had this image in my head of Cynthia Evero. And then this book is straight up says she's white. And my brain was like, nah. But if not for the Holly Gibney story in here, this would have been a 3-star book. The only story in here I didn't like was the Life of Chuck one. I understood it, mostly. I just didn't like it very much. It started with a part called Act 3, followed by Act 1. And I'm guessing that the gap in the middle was to represent the life of Chuck, and that it's something personal that we as readers wouldn't be privy to. But it felt like the 2 acts were so distant from each other, they felt like 2 completely unrelated stories. A big theme of this collection is the idea of work, with characters taking very different attitudes towards professions, towards their jobs and careers. I think that was very interesting. And each of the stories also addresses death in a very big and a very different way. Maybe there's also a theme of trying to change the inevitable and the consequences that follow that. One thing that really strikes me all the time with King's writing is how flawlessly he captures the feeling and setting of the period the book is written in. You can read his older books and be like, yeah, that feels really 80s, that feels really 90s. But his stuff coming out now makes reference to modern stuff in a way that's organic and not forced. And we'll probably look back on this stuff and be like, oh, that feels really 2010s. I think one of his plus points as an author is that he's not stuck in a time period. I also think that in a lot of ways he actually shines better in his short stories than he does in his longer work. Short stories being a snippet or a slice or a window into a world without necessarily describing the whole world allow authors to really let their hair down and go a bit crazy, be more inventive than they can be in longer pieces. Honestly, some of my favourite Stephen King stuff ever is short stories. Also, side note, I didn't think the first time I would ever see a poo emoji printed in a book would be in a Stephen King book, but there is a poo emoji in this. There you go, he did it. Ballsy move. Still finding my feet in terms of how I review short story collections. This is probably quite a short video. I'm going to give this book 4 stars. My favourite King era was definitely late 80s, early 90s. I think that for me defines classic King. But I will be working my way through everything King. When I've smashed my way through, when I'm up to date, I'll do one of those cool tier ranking videos. You can all hear my opinions and hot takes. I like this collection slightly more than Full Dark No Stars and slightly less than Different Seasons. So that's roughly where it sits for me. So like and subscribe, stay tuned for my Stephen King journey and the ranking ladder coming one day in the future, soon maybe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, I'll link that down below. Don't forget to follow me on Goodreads, I'll link that down below. And don't forget to join our Sci-Fi Interstellar book club if you like science fiction, which I'll also link down below, is on Discord. So thanks very much for tuning in for this review, and I'll see you soon for the next one. Bye.